We ask you, your goodness, to give eternal light and peace to all who died here.
Eternal blessing. Today and every day, may we understand our shared mission to be, in the words of Pope Francis,
God of peace, bring your peace to our violent world.
Avavatu sahanao bunaktu sahabiriam karavavahi.
May God protect us. May God nourish us. May we work together.
Namo Buddhaya Jayang Verang Pasavati.
Victory begets enmity. The defeated dwell in pain.
ना के साडे पेश तो सच्चों और सबको.
That truth is above everything, and the highest deed is truthful living.
Μακάρι η πτωχή το πνεύματι, ότι αυτόν εστίν η βασιλεία των ουρανών.
For theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn.
وإليك يرجع السلام.
Grant us to live with the salutation of peace, and lead us to your abode of peace.
Medical Report. This is Tim Alexander, Lord Sterling. I'm sitting in as host for this hour for Dr. Beldigo. And with me is Jeff DeVillay. Jeff is an old friend of mine. I shouldn't say old friend. We're getting old, right, Jeff?
You can say that.
Been a friend of mine for many years. He's a political commentator. He's a recording engineer, knows about half of everybody in the recording industry, and is a very intelligent fella. Anyway, Jeff, I want to start out by updating our listeners on some things that's happening in the Middle East. It appears that the Chinese may be sending fighters, troops to Syria. A Chinese warship just passed the Suez Canal. It's not known exactly where they're heading, but it appears that they're heading towards the Eastern Mediterranean Ocean. Russia has announced that it's sending a battle fleet to the Eastern Mediterranean. The three principal ships are a battle cruiser, a massive guided missile battle cruiser, a destroyer, anti-submarine destroyer, as well as a large troop landing ship. Additionally, the supply of Russian material, aircraft, helicopters, armored vehicles into Syria continues. It now appears that besides the one base that they already have opening, they're opening two additional bases in Syria. It may very well be that we're seeing the beginning of a virtual flood of Russian, Chinese, and Iranian troops.
Hardware, right?
Well, hardware of all kinds into Syria. This will do one of two things. This will either wipe out ISIS and put a stop to the Western and Israeli war on Syria through our proxies, ISIS and the other Al-Qaeda and so forth, or it will begin the all-out phase of the Third World War. Really, if you look at this stepping way back, the globalists, way back from the trees, the globalists have been baiting Russia for quite some time now to get Russia involved into a Third World War scenario. If you look historically at what the global banking cartel and their Zionist allies do, is they get us into chaos. Military chaos, wars, particularly global wars. The first was the Napoleonic Wars, followed by World War I, World War II. They get us into economic recessions and all-out depressions, which we're in now, and all kinds of chaos. And from that, their motto is order out of chaos. And, of course, order always means they win and millions of people die miserable deaths.
Right.
So
well, you know, a lot of these things you just mentioned are the standard distractions. Let's have a war. Let's have an economic collapse. Let's drop the stock market. Let's raise interest rates. You know, all of those things are things that can be easily done by the people in the positions of power that do them and have really no bearing, public opinion has no bearing on what happens in any of those instances. So basically they do what they want, and you put up and like it or don't like it, that's the way it's going to be. And so, you know, what you talk about there in the Mideast and what's going on with China and Russia and Syria, all those things, you know, those things just didn't happen last night. You know, and they've been going on for centuries. You know, 20 billion tons of explosives in a building and throw gasoline on it and light it and not have something go wrong.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you know, it's very interesting. There was a Confederate Civil War general, Albert Pike, who sent a letter that was kept on display at the British Library in London, and it's been copied. It was published several places. Later, when a Rothschild got appointed to the board of directors, the letter disappeared. It's never been seen since, but luckily it was well published before then. And the letter, which was written several years before the First World War started, was very interesting. It pretty much described in considerable detail how the First World War and the Second World War would be fought, who was going to fight who, and the outcome of it. And the Third World War was also described, and he described it as a battle between the Mujahideen, which meant Muslims back then, and Christians. And we seem to be being set up for that. There's an awful lot of anti-Muslim propaganda in the mainstream media.
700 plus people died at the
Hajj
trip to Mecca, the Hajj, whatever.
When I see a woman that is expected to wear a thing from her head all the way to her feet, and maybe her eyes show, or maybe not even that, and she peeps out of the world through some sort of like a little cloth screen, I find that horribly repugnant.
Yeah,
I mean,
you know, it's 100 degrees.
Over half the human race is supposed to act like chattel, and they can't even show their face.
Right.
That's ludicrous.
Well, it is. You know, quick, it's 100 degrees, get my wife a black electric blanket. You know, really, that's some logic.
Well, you know, I think I've said it on the air, and I think probably I've told you one time I was going up, I think to Indianapolis up Highway 41 from Evansville, and I stopped at Vincennes at I don't know, Mickey D's, McDonald's, someplace for lunch. And there was an Arab family came in, and he was dressed, and it was July or August, and it was almost 100 degrees, high humidity, hotter than hell. And the guy was the man of the family. He had shorts on and sandals and a polo shirt, and all the kids were dressed like that, but they were all young. The girls obviously hadn't, start menstruating yet. But his poor wife, she was covered, at least it was silk, not cloth or wool, but she was covered from head to foot, and she had a veil over her nose. The only skin you could see on her was her eyes, and she even had black gloves on. And she picked up her hamburger and lifted the veil a little bit and put the hamburger under there. And I'll tell you, he could wear shorts and be comfortable, and she had to wear that outfit.
Well, you notice there aren't a lot of self-described Christians moving to the Mideast for whatever reason.
No, that would be one of the last places I'd want to move to.
I don't. It's not to pun or to make fun of anyone or any philosophy, but there are two very simple tenets in the United States. Then there's some problem there.
Well, of course, and that doesn't seem to connect with some people. We just had the incident a couple of days ago that came out where American troops have been disciplined for intervening and in some cases simply complaining about hearing Afghan soldiers that they were working with rape young boys. Mm-hmm. And I mean, and they were told by our generals to be quiet. That's just outrageous.
Starting to sound like Rome. Well, go ahead.
Well, I mean, it doesn't sound like America, I'll tell you that much for sure.
No, it doesn't.
Guys, we'll be right back in just a minute. This is Tim Alexander and Jeff DeVlay. This is the Nutro Medical Report. Tim Alexander and Jeff DeVlay reporting. Jeff, a couple more things I want to cover about Syria. The Pentagon and the Russian military officials did meet on safety risks for pilots over Syria, but the Pentagon says no more talks until Russia basically agrees to the American proposals on kicking Assad out and so forth. Now, you've got Turkey with the largest number of F-16s on Earth outside the U.S. Air Force. They've got over 300 F-16s right next door to Syria. We've got some of our Air Force there. We've got a Navy carrier in the Med and another one in the Gulf. We've got, there's the British, the French, the Australians, the Germans, several other NATO countries have aircraft.
Israelis, the list is endless.
Oh, yeah. Well, another very interesting thing, retired four-star General Petraeus, who was after he was a four-star Army general, he was the CIA director until he got caught having an affair with his former secretary and giving her secret information that he wasn't supposed to. He had to resign. But he has confirmed that U.S. commandos, U.S. Special Forces, are fighting in Syria. And that was a confirmation, really, by four-star Army General Lloyd Austin, who told the Senate committee last week that our Special Operation Forces are operating in northern Syria. Now, that's another war that American troops are fighting and dying in. And I lost count a long time ago how many wars we're in right now.
I did read about a month, maybe 6 weeks ago, that we were in 125. So if this one starts, we can put another mark on the wall.
The British Empire for years was built up to be the enforcement arm of the global banking cartel families. And, I was Scottish editor over at Berks Peerage and all this stuff, and I read a lot about so many of these families. And last century and the century before, the 19th and 20th centuries, the upper class in Britain, so many of them were military officers or part-time military officers, colonels, majors, and so forth, the generals. And the reason for that is that empire was really the enforcement arm for the global banking cartel. Well, we broke the back of the First World War, broke the back of the United Kingdom, and the Second World War finished them off as far as any empire. Now they're simply a European power with a couple hundred nukes. But we're the guy that gets to go out and spend trillions of our tax dollars and a lot of the blood of our...
we're the people that lose the thousands of soldiers, and we also are the people that have 27 million children that are hungry. justice is what you find and where you find it.
Hey, we have spent, depending on which figure you want to quote, either $3 trillion in Afghanistan, or some say by the time we pay off the debt that we've incurred for that $3 trillion,
we're not going to pay off that
taking care of all the boys that have come home, basket cases shot up and all, and they have to be in a hospital or under care the rest of their lives. That the amount will be close to $6 trillion in that terrible rat hole. And for what reason?
Well, to enrich a few, a tiny little group of people who are warmongers who thrive on the deaths of millions.
Yeah, exactly. Well, they finally pushed Russia and Iran and China too far. Russia, by the way, is developing 2 additional military bases in Syria. One thing that concerns me, of course, we've seen this virtual flood of immigrants desperate to get into Europe the last 3 weeks. And many, they say 72% are military-aged men, and roughly 2/3 are not Syrians. And they're saying that many are disguising themselves as Syrians. And what I'm concerned about, and of course they're already laid the groundwork for this, saying they've caught several terrorists, is we could see something some big events begin happening in Europe, and blamed on the quote-unquote Muslims. Because remember, getting back to Albert Pike's letter, the Third World War.
What does a tag cost that you have sewn inside of your shirt? Because we could, maybe make a couple of 100 million of those that say made in Syria, and probably do pretty well in the Mideast right now.
Yeah, right. Well, the ISIS captured the printing presses for Syrian passports some months ago, so they're flooding the market. They're selling to anybody that wants to pay about $1,000 for them, with your picture and everything else. And a reporter in a German paper put it wasn't a German paper, it was one of the European papers, put the prime minister of his country, I think it was Denmark, the prime minister's picture in the passport.
On the passport.
And it was and he wrote a story on it and had a photo on it, and the whole thing was to demonstrate that we don't know who all these people coming in Europe are, and I think they're being set up. Most great drive to the Third World War.
Most of the great cultures and societies of the world have fallen more from what happened within than without.
That's sad to say. Well, when we were kids in grade school, they blew out the brains of President Kennedy in broad daylight, and the people that were involved in it were never prosecuted. They claimed the patsy that was standing in front when the motorcade went past, not upstairs, shooting a rifle, Oswald, had did it, but he didn't, and of course they managed to kill him right away to keep him shut up. And since then, we've been going downhill more and more in this country. We now have 103 million working-age Americans out of work, where, a large part of most cities now are ghettos. Maybe 20% is a black ghetto, but the rest is a white ghetto. And people are getting
when the houses look the same, and the quality of life is the same. It really doesn't matter what color they are. It's just all ghetto.
Yeah, well, they're not maintained. There's no money. Some people get involved in dope dealing or violent crimes simply to try to survive. And of course, the immorality. You just get a bunch of monsters in your society that prey on other people, and people need to work. And we've sent over 50,000 of our factories overseas and actually gave tax credits to American companies for sending their factories overseas.
The jobs outsourced, yeah.
How crazy can you get? How crazy can you get? Folks, we'll be back in a couple minutes. Steve Lay, and now Chris Harris, our nuclear engineer and nuclear expert, is joining us. Chris, what's the latest on Fukushima and the nightmare out in the Pacific?
An article from the Japan Times came out about 2 days ago, and it said radioactive rain releases cannot be curbed due to lack of a lot of things. In this case, they're talking about laws, but also there's certainly no infrastructure to cope with the rainwater washing contaminated soil. We alluded to that last week. But more importantly...
we had how many? I mean, there were literally hundreds, if not thousands, of really large bags. I mean, far larger than a human being, full of contaminated soil and various other radioactive waste products, just stacked on the ground. And I remember we talked about this some weeks or months ago, and one of the things we were talking about is, what happens if you get another. Not even a tsunami, but a big cyclone hits the place. Well, guess what happened in the last week or so? A big cyclone hit that particular area, and thousands of these things floated out to sea.
Well, and they've had some sizable quakes since that original bad quake. So, any time something could happen there much worse, a huge wave or whatnot, and take those things into the ocean and just worsen a problem that's already bad.
Yep. Chris?
Well, it's just that, it was a typhoon Etal, I guess that was how you pronounce it. I mean, it was something that we discussed really as to put on your list of things to do to try to keep the contamination from getting worse and spreading further. I guess it's been a long time since we've been talking about this all together. It was 2011, and we said you've got to cover the plants up. You've got to find a way to keep the contaminated soil around the plant from washing away, because that's going to be a very large source of contamination. And it's just funny that they did do the cover. They did actually do that, not because you and I said so, but it was because it was the only logical thing that they could do. But they didn't do a lot of things. They didn't do many of the actions that we came up with. I know I wrote many of them down and said, this is what I would do and my peers would do. And they didn't stabilize any of the soil around it or anything like that. And
Chris, do you think that's an economic or a political question there? Why
that's an economic question right there. Well, you got to think about it this way. We figured TEPCO would just throw their hands in the air and says, well, this never happened before, and we'll pretty much wash our hands of it. I guess that's kind of a pun. But and in essence, it looks like they were doing that until there was a lot of pressure on them from folks like us and from other folks to actually take some sort of an action, even though a lot of it was eyewash in the beginning, and now it's certainly it's stepped up quite a bit. But right now, the horse has left the barn, and that
jingle keeps going through my head. We bring good things to life. You heard that before, probably. And this is one of the good things that apparently have brought to life.
Yeah, right. They're killing the Pacific Ocean, largest ocean on Earth. They are killing life from one end to the other. It's not all dead, but
Well, in other news, fellas, Volkswagen diesels are cheap this week.
Actually, I was talking to someone about that yesterday, and I had one of my listeners on my news blog Europe send me some stuff on that. And there is a theory that this event, these charges and claims against Volkswagen are part of a war, part of the Third World War. And the reason that we have gone after Volkswagen and may in fact break the back of the largest auto manufacturer in Germany and drive them into bankruptcy is because many in the German establishment are now saying, and by the way, I reported this about a week ago, the chairman of Merkel's party, very important person, broke with her officially and said that Germany should side with Russia, Iran, and China on Syria. The influx of all these migrants into Germany, literally maybe 1 million or so, is freaking them out. And they also see this drive towards war, a global war. Germany was destroyed twice in the 20th century by world wars, and there are a lot of powerful, wealthy business people in Germany that are screaming no. And Merkel has been taking it from both sides, and this is pressure on her and the Germans by the globalist elite saying, look, if you don't play ball with us, we are going to hurt you very badly. But to some extent, that's an indication that the wheels are coming off the globalist agenda. But they're very dangerous people, and they rule by driving the world into chaos. Out of chaos comes order, their order. And, getting back to Fukushima, there are two broad groups of people that scare the globalists the most. It's Europeans, and I include in that pan-Europeans, Americans, Canadians, Australia, and New Zealand, but also the Japanese. We're the most warlike, we're the most industrial, and we scare the globalists. And if you look at what happened in Japan with this Fukushima thing, with the original earthquake that caused the tsunami, that caused all the problems, that earthquake, the Q waves that scientists measure, they were not consistent with a natural event. And the evidence is that there were several small tactical nuclear weapons set off in a string, and that is what actually caused the tsunami, which overwhelmed the 5
reactors,
nuclear power plants. Yeah. And those particular reactors, probably at least one of them, was in fact tied into the secret Japanese nuclear weapons programs. So the Japanese did not respond to things as they probably should have and as they could have been expected to, because they were very concerned about covering up something that is the most sensitive secret in Japan because of their anti-nuclear feelings by the nuclear war feelings by the masses of people, and that is that Japan is a major nuclear weapons power.
Well, they are.
Oh, yeah. Have been for years. But this, what has happened in Fukushima is virtually a population reduction program, and I think that's one of the reasons it's running. The globalists want to seriously reduce the population. We have over 7 million people. They want to reduce it by over 6.5 billion people. We have over 7 billion people. They want to reduce it by over 6.5 billion people. That's a lot of people to die.
It's a lot to die, but they also won't have the access to all that money to perpetuate their situation. So,
yeah. This is Tim Alexander, Jeff Taylor, and Chris Harris. We'll be back in just a couple minutes, folks.
That's the sound your brain makes when I lost my mind. There was something so pleasant about that place. Even your emotions have an echo.
This is the Nutra Medical Report. Chris Harris, Jeff DeVillay, and Tim Alexander. What a thing, before I forget, I want to cover, this is on my news blog Europe, The United States Air Force is currently in the process of converting some 30 operational B-52H models. These are the latest Stratofortress long-range nuclear bombers. They're converting 30 of these into conventional bombers and taking an additional dozen out of storage that's in the Arizona desert and converting them. So we're going to have 42 newly outfitted long-range, global range, virtually with refueling, conventional bombers that can engage in carpet bombing. Now, why this is important, the U.S. Air Force always does this when it's about to get into a major war. We used converted B-52s for carpet bombing in Vietnam. We used them in the First and Second Gulf War. And now that we're in a crash program to bring out 42 of these as heavy conventional bombers is a very serious indicator of American intent. And, of course, with that, you've got the Chinese and Russians sending warships into the eastern Med by Syria. Everybody's appears to be flying in all kind of weapons of destruction and troops and everything else, aircraft into the whole Middle East, and it's not looking good. But this thing with Volkswagen is indicative of the fact that we are already in certain levels of the Third World War. Pope Francis, and I think Pope Francis is very heavy on the PR and light on results. As Nixon's Attorney General said, judge us by what we do, not by what we say. And Pope Francis talks a great line, but the first thing he did when he landed in America, he told the American bishops, you've got to clean up this child molestation problem. Well, guess what? He's been Pope for about 2.5 years, and he hasn't ended mandatory celibacy, a 600-year-old rule in a 2,000-year institution. And until you end that, you're not going to end the molestation of little boys by priests. You've got to clean up some of these jokers that are in the priesthood. But anyway, all this to me says we're in the end times, and we've got some really bad things coming our way. I've talked enough, guys. What do you think?
Well, I think it's true. I mean, constantly, it's been a constant through at least the past century that military buildups have ordinarily led to conflicts that were always more lengthy and 10 times more expensive to control and finish than they were to start. I think that it's always been true that over the same period of time, people that are involved in manufacturing these things, the events and the products that serve them, enrich themselves at the expense of everyone else. And I don't see that changing. In fact, I see it intensifying from my point of view.
Chris, if we end up in an all-out shooting war with the Russians, the Chinese, the Iranians, and who knows who else, and it ends up at least partially, if not fully, going nuclear. You're a nuclear expert. What would that mean for the people of Earth and the people in the United States?
You could forget about survival in any of the large cities where targets would probably be most likely. That'd be pretty harsh, Tim. I mean, that's something. Just think if the initial blast doesn't get you, the sickness to follow, and then of course the breakdown of the entire infrastructure and supply. I mean, heck, right now we're talking about the possibility of a government shutdown disrupting food stamp recipients and such. I mean, this would this would be far worse than even that, and that would be really bad too.
Well, and you know, if you have a big part of the infrastructure taken out, and EMP resulting from 1 to 3 high altitude nuclear bursts over the United States, which would fry a big part of our electrical grid system. Remember, we have 100 plus nuclear reactors in the United States. Is that number right, Chris? I don't.
104, but if their targets do, I mean, it just makes the whole thing worse. I mean, absolutely.
Well, but you've got to keep them. You got to keep them cool, right?
Well, absolutely. And if you have, if we start getting attacked in this country, well, then that would take care of the electrical supply system that does exactly what you just said, keep them cool. And there isn't an endless supply of diesel fuel to do the job.
Yeah, they all have emergency generators and maybe a month's supply of fuel. But if your infrastructure is destroyed, you're going to be very difficult to move.
Even with the example of Fukushima, that's 4 years old. So you got a month of fuel. So what?
Yeah, that month goes by pretty quick.
What is going to happen? Exactly, it goes by pretty quick while everyone is trying to scramble to obtain more supplies and to get them on their way through whatever it is.
Quite frankly, a very limited nuclear attack or even an EMP attack without nukes going off on the ground could effectively destroy America, because we have well over 100 nuclear reactors, a great many of which would go critical, Fukushima style, and we'd be in a world of hurt from one end of the country to the other. I have on my news blog about 3 days ago a nuclear targets map of the United States. And, of course, there are areas out west that there's not any red spots. The red spots indicate one or more thermonuclear target. But there would be enough chaos and enough radioactivity fallout if we ever get into a major nuclear exchange with Russia and or China. That basically, depending on how big it was, we'd lose 100 million to 200 million people pretty quickly. And it would take us God knows how many decades or centuries to dig ourselves out of that mess.
If we could.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And this, I don't say all this stuff to just try to scare people. The point is that if you look at what's happening with the deployment of forces, the wars that are going on, the clear direction that the globalists and Zionists are taking us, I mean, we're headed towards an all-out third world war. Now, that may or may not happen, but the very fact that you can sit here and realistically say we're headed towards the third world war, and a lot of people are saying that, my God, how nuts, how insane can that be? Who the hell would win from
Dick Cheney.
Well, in hell? I mean, because he'll be in hell. But I think he's earned his place down there a long time ago. But who could win? And the globalists want to reduce the population, come out of their bunkers. That's a demonic wet dream. That's not going to happen, for God's sakes.
No way. No,
they're going to stay down there. They're going to have to stay. Absolutely.
Well, how can you live in a cave, even if you have food and water for centuries? I mean, how realistic is that?
We weren't put on earth to live like that.
Yeah, and how nuts, that's why I say it's clearly demonic. It's even a crazy human being would want to do that. This is clearly outside of the human race. This is demonic. Well, Chris and Jeff, thank you very much for being on the show. And thank you, Dr. Bell, for letting us on your show. Folks, I always try to close
for having us.
Yes. Thanks for listening, and get right with God, because we're in crazy times, and hope and pray for peace. God bless. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.